Good morning, everyone. My name is Fred Kingston. I'm the Executive Secretary of the Northwest Atlantic Fisheries Organization, uh, or NAFO is the acronym, and which is an RFMO based in where the secretary. I'm the head of the secretariat based in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And I've been asked to speak to you about the use of area-based management tools in fisheries management, and in particular regarding NAFO. So first of all, I'd like to give those who know NAFO a refresher course in what NAFO is, and those that don't, obviously, a course in what NAFO is. Then I will go through area-based management tools that we use in NAFO in general. Then we'll talk about NAFO's ecosystem approach framework to fisheries management. And in this approach framework, we also use some particular area-based management tools as well, particularly for the protection of vulnerable marine ecosystems, or VMEs. And finally, I'll have some closing remarks. So first of all, NAFO. NAFO is an International Regional Fisheries Management Organization, RFMO. International cooperation in both fishery science and fishery management. This is maybe different from some other RFMOs. Each RFMO may be established, their structure, institutional structure is different. And we have our own scientific council and our own commission or fisheries management body. We manage the fishery in the international waters of the Northwest Atlantic, and we have 4 coastal states: Canada, the United States, France for Saint-Pierre-Miquelon, and Denmark for Greenland. Actually, in fact, we have 5 coastal states. In fact, Bermuda, the southern part of the convention area of NAFO, it reaches about a 50-mile circular segment of the Bermuda EEZ. But so in practice, there's 5 coastal states, but the convention only recognizes coastal states of those who are members of NAFO, and Bermuda currently isn't. NAFO was established over 40 years ago in 1979 by an international treaty. But it succeeded its predecessor organization, ICNAF, which was formed in 1949. So NAFO is over 70 years old. And the NAFO convention was substantially amended in 2007. This would be to provide more modern concepts such as the precautionary approach, ecosystem approach, etc. Objective: to ensure the long-term conservation, sustainable use of the fishery resources in the convention area, a traditional RFMO objective. And then what was added in the convention, in the current convention, and in doing so, to safeguard the marine ecosystems in which these resources are found. Jurisdiction: the NAFO convention area is the entire Northwest Atlantic. And as you see, you draw a line down from the tip of Greenland south, and then draw a line east from Cape Hatteras, and where they meet inside of that is the convention area. The NAFO regulatory area is the area outside the 200-mile limits of the coastal states there, as you can see in this diagram. As you can see, the NAFO convention area does not cover the northern mid-Atlantic ridge, but obviously we are quite close to it. And the NAFO area, the regulatory area, it's one of the few areas where the continental shelf extends beyond the 200-mile limits of coastal states. And NAFO fisheries that are regulated are mainly bottom trawling. We have 13 contracting parties. The UK joined in September of this year, just in time for our annual meeting. So that you can see the flags. 12 species currently under management. Most of these are fished by bottom fishing, by bottom trawl fishing. The exceptions would be squid, shrimp, and splendid Alfonsino. And that stock is fished down in the southern part of the convention area on, or it has been fished. There's a moratorium on fishery now in the corner ice, one of the corner ice seamounts in sub-area 6. And here, just to give you a good idea of what the economic value of the fishery, 47 vessels in 2019, 74,000 tons, and the value is approximately 452 million Canadian dollars, or about 309 million euro. Now I will get into the use of area-based management tools used by NAFO. Area-based management tools are a common practice of NAFO fisheries, of NAFO's fisheries management regime. You must keep in mind that most of NAFO managed stocks are groundfish stocks. These include the delineation of the fishing footprint. This is the area in which fishing normally occurs. Various fish stock boundaries. Tools such as move-on rules, for instance, when certain bycatch thresholds have been reached, and area-based management tools have been used to protect vulnerable marine ecosystems and seamounts, and I will get into this latter point later on. So this is a picture of and a part of the NAFO regulatory area. You see that the NAFO stock boundaries are divided into sub-areas and divisions. Sub-areas is the number 3 here in this case. This is the area where the continental shelf goes beyond the 200-mile limit and where most of the fishing takes place. And we have various stocks. So we may have, for instance, 3 cod stocks that are delimited by area. 3M, which is a totally discrete stock on the Flemish Cap. 3L, which is the Northern Grand Banks. 3NO, which is the Southern Grand Banks. And for the other species that that NAFO has, that NAFO manages, they are divided amongst the various sub-areas. So this is a classic classic situation where area-based management tools are used. Now I'll get into our ecosystem approach framework to fisheries management. And NAFO had begun the process to formulate and adopt measures to implement an ecosystem approach to fisheries all the way back in 2005, so 15 years ago. And even before the UN General Assembly resolution calling RFMOs to protect Vmes. I won't go into that. And specifically on the ecosystem approach, NAFO has developed an institutional structure, particularly within its scientific council. The scientific council has a working group on ecosystem science and assessment, which provides the basic science for possible decisions by the organization later on. These recommendations of this working group go through the Scientific Council and then go through a working group on ecosystem approach framework to fisheries management, which is a joint group between fisheries managers and scientists. And much of the work has been focusing so far on the protection of VMEs. And how the institutional structure works is an annual cycle of ecosystem advice. If you can see my cursor, decisions are made in September at the annual meeting, and the request for advice is made in September of the annual meeting. When it's for ecosystem advice, the working group on ecosystem science and assessment meets in mid-November. They are currently meeting right now, or they've just ended their meeting by the time this presentation. This goes to the Scientific Council in general, which then formulates an advice. then goes to the joint working group, and finally the recommendations that flow through here, once they get through all these filters, go back the following year to the commission for decision. So that's how the cycle of advice works. Now, in terms of protection of VMEs, protection of VMEs, international obligation to protect VMEs, is referred to in numerous UN General Assembly resolutions. VMEs are easily damaged and have a very slow recovery or may never recover. And VME indicator species include sponges, corals, sea pens, bryozoans, et cetera, et cetera. The identification of VMEs, and I think you've gone through this before, but we use the FAO Deep Sea Fisheries guidelines, and you can see the various characteristics that are there. I don't think this is anything new for any of you. And NAFO has identified in its identification of VMEs, it has identified concentrations of VME indicator species mainly through trawl surveys. Then the areas themselves, the polygons in which the areas are then determined through kernel density analysis and are further refined through species distribution modeling. This is the work that's being done by our WG working group on ecosystem science and assessment. And in order to protect VMEs, NAFO has relied heavily on area-based management tools to protect them, particularly area closures. And this has started 15 years ago when NAFO first closed 4 seamount areas to bottom fishing. I should note at this point that the seamount closures are not based on observed observations, but the presence of topographical features that typically support VMEs. Concerning the VME indicator species, the current focus has been on the protection of corals and sponges because these are basically fixed to the bottom and probably easier to delineate with area closures. However, the work has been ongoing on other VME indicator species such as bryozoans and sea squirts. So the various tools that we use to protect VMEs. We establish an existing bottom fishing area, a footprint. We have established closed areas following the scientific justification. We have move-on rules if there is an encounter with a significant amount of VME indicator species in a fishing trawl within the footprint. Bottom fishing is not allowed in fishing areas outside the footprint, except with scientific justification as a precondition. This is through our exploratory protocol fishery measures. And every 5 years, we reassess bottom fishing activities. And to illustrate what they are, we currently have 14 closed areas, which are mainly sponge, coral, and sea pan areas, plus 6 seamount areas. The VME closed areas are in red, the 6 seamount areas are in blue, which currently is over 275 square kilometers, or about over 10.34% of the NRA, the NAFO regulatory area. So this illustrates, here's the NAFO regulatory area. Here is in green is the NAFO footprint, where bottom fishing is the only area that bottom fishing takes place and is allowed to take place. The remainder of the NRA is subject to the extensive fisheries exploratory fisheries protocol, and for now, there is no bottom fishing going on outside the green areas. And add that to that, bottom trawling is obviously prohibited in the red areas, which are the seamount and VME closures. So out of the entire NAFO regulatory area, only about 4.25% is open to bottom trawling. As I said, NAFO reassesses its VME seamount closures every 5 years, and the next one is next year. We are also looking at applying the deep sea fisheries guidelines on significant adverse impact, and looking at all six criteria to see how our closures have whether our closures have been effective and have not been doing significant adverse impact on VMEs. Some of the first three we probably have fairly good science, but the issue of ability of the ecosystem to recover, the extent to which ecosystem functions may be altered, and the timing and duration of the impact is areas in which our scientific council and in particular the working group is looking at right now. Finally, closing remarks. Over the past 15 years, NAFO has worked to develop its measures to protect VMEs and seamounts from bottom fishing based on the FAO deep sea guidelines, fisheries guidelines, and the work of its scientific councils. I should note here that these measures can only be imposed on NAFO-managed fisheries. NAFO has no legal competency to impose measures on other ocean activities, such as deep sea mining and oil and gas activity. Nevertheless, these closures should be taken into account by other ocean actors. Thank you very much.